small and got yourself a gun. Your mama always said you'd be the chosen one. She said, 1 in a million, you got to burn the shine.
Probably the most profound was in 2007. Stepped on an IED in Iraq.
May 18th of last year, I was sexually assaulted by another active duty military member.
I had a IED go off under my helicopter when I was a little less than 100 feet off the ground. I mean, every day flying helicopters over Baghdad was getting shot at. Kids screaming at you from the ground, they're getting shot at. You're shooting back, you're shooting them. It wouldn't be nothing to go in at night and get a list of 10 houses that you're going to go pump hellfires into. No one's ever asked me about it until you did. Looking back now, extreme experiences, and you went home at the end of the day and you never talked about it.
Since 2003, I've done 7 combat deployments.
The first firefight I got into, my gunner, he got shot in the chest, and just being the squad leader and seeing your guy drop down inside the gun, it's a complete feeling of helplessness. And while we were there was a suicide bomber that blew up pretty much in front of the convoy. It killed a bunch of kids. That was pretty gruesome.
Tell me about your limitations from your PTSD symptoms.
For example, I hated being in crowds of people, just being around people in general. And eventually it got to the point where I would make excuses why I didn't even want to go to the grocery store, or just be at even at work functions. If it involved lots of people standing around in a room, I didn't even want to be around it, and I would make excuses to leave. But out of nowhere, I would go from like a 3 to a 10 and just explode and start shouting and throwing stuff and really upset.
What treatments did you try before we did the stellate ganglion block?
I've so many things. Initially, when I was in the hospital, I did a PTSD support group, medications, Zoloft, Wellbutrin. I never really followed through with a lot of the treatments. Mostly it was, because I was continuing to deploy, or I just felt like I wasn't getting anything out of it, so I just stopped doing it. There was a concern at a time where I felt like I was drinking too much, so I just stopped altogether.
Were you drinking because of your symptoms?
I would say yeah. There was definitely a period in my life where, especially right after I was injured, and while I was going through my divorce, that I would just drink to kind of forget everything, just try to numb it out.
I had every symptom possible as far as having PTSD, in the sense that I had a very difficult time sleeping. I had very bad nightmares. So my nightmares were really not about the actual event itself, but the individual. I felt like he was crawling around wherever I was. If I was sleeping on the couch, he was crawling on the window. If I was sleeping in bed, he was crawling on my door, like trying to crawl through the door. I constantly just felt like he was trying to get at me.
But in the last year to year and a half, I began having extremely vivid dreams where I'd be back in the cockpit. I'd be back trying to, something would happen, a blast would happen, and I would do something with the flight controls and they didn't work, and the airplane would go down. I'd wake up in a cold sweat as the aircraft impacted the ground. Several times a week, if not almost every night, having these crazy dreams I never had. And I found myself during the day reminiscing and thinking about those experiences I had that I never talked to anybody about.
You go into a crowd. When I go, I don't feel like I can enjoy myself. And when I go, I feel like I'm always on alert. I feel nervous. I feel sweaty. I always feel like I'm looking for an exit. I feel like I'm looking for a terrorist. I feel like I'm looking for something that shouldn't be there. I had dreams where my kids would always be drowned. Like there was a monster inside my house, and I'd see it in the garage, and I'd go in the garage looking for it. And when I'd come back in, I'd hear my kids screaming. I went back up, and they were drowning in the bathtub. Like all 3 of my girls, just the top of the bathtub had hair floating on top of it. And it happened after my deployments, and I always had the exact same dream. Like some monster was drowning my children. It's crazy.
And you never had anything like this before your deployments?
Never before. To be honest with you, I didn't get any help at all for years. You know, I thought it was just the way you're supposed to. This is the way you become after you're deployed. Like everyone deals with it, just being in an army environment. That's how it's supposed to be. But you know, I got divorced, and I realized there was something wrong with me.
Extreme detachment from your family members, the inability to connect, avoiding, you know, crowds or groups, and even if those groups were friends and family, I just increasingly isolated myself away from really everyone and everything. You know, going to the state fair could lead to, you know, an almost complete panic attack where I would feel extremely hypervigilant. I would feel like with the crowd and probably with everyone being in good spirits that, you know, I just felt imminent danger. I feel like anything could lead to something bad, something horrible, something dreadful. And I was so scared, but I was oddly conscious of the fact that everything that I was thinking was insane. My child was not a year old yet, not wanting to get close to her because I felt like either she would be taken away or that I would be taken away from her. I felt as though something had to happen to make it stop, or that if something didn't happen, then I had to make something happen to stop. And it wasn't until after the first block that I realized that was probably the first indication, or a very it was an indication that I was suicidal.
I felt like everything was crumbling and coming at me all at once. I wasn't doing well at work. I wasn't paying my bills. I wasn't even checking my mail. I had no real desire to do anything for the day-to-day.
And your score at that time, your PCL score is quite high at 74, which is actually a very high score. You'd already tried a lot of things, gotten some relief, but you were still at a very high level. So describe your experiences actually having the stellate ganglion block.
It wasn't painful. It wasn't scary or anything like that, like I thought it would be. It was very easy. The one thing, I asked you the question how I would feel, or when would I start to feel the difference, and you said, well, I'll let you tell me that after I give you the block. I didn't understand what you meant at that time. I kind of thought, okay, he's just saying, you know, but within 30 minutes of having the block, I completely felt like myself, more like myself than I had in a long time. I felt like the weight was lifted off of my shoulders.
Very, very calm procedure. Like I said, it was a 1 on the pain scale, kind of a 10 on the weird scale.
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect, and the procedure itself. I mean, you explained to me what you were going to do. You had me sign a waiver, and then you sat me down on the table, and you gave me a saline lock, and you gave me a shot pretty much into my neck to numb it, and then you put a needle into the side of my neck, and I felt a little bit of pressure. There was no real pain. You know, I was a little bit nervous, I guess, just having something put into my neck, but it was easy.
It didn't really bother me. I mean, I've been poked and prodded by doctors and surgeons so much that it wasn't that big of a deal.
How did you feel immediately after the block and in the following weeks?
The immediate feeling was, I didn't expect it at all. I felt like really happy.
I felt very euphoric, very, very relaxed, and I literally felt like $1,000,000. Like I just had this euphoric, euphoric maybe a bad word to use, but very calming peace about me. Like I hadn't slept that good in well over a year. My ability to concentrate was a lot better.
I just got to a point where I felt like it was completely out of control, and now I don't feel like that.
So if the numbers are accurate, they're saying that there's 26,000 sexual assaults within the military here recently. Is there anything that you'd want to add on your experiences with the stellate ganglion block in relation to this?
I think everybody should have the opportunity to do the block if they want to do it. it can only do positive things for the people that are in my situation that have been sexually assaulted, and kind of help. Like, you would use the term before that it kind of rebooted me, and I really and truly believe that that's what it did. It just kicked me back into a new me again, and I hope that it becomes available to more people who are in my situation.
If you had now, you've had a lot of different treatments, and I'm not looking to like grade things out, but how, if you had to say, if you had to quantify, you know, how effective the block was, would you say that it was somewhat effective?
I would say it was the most effective treatment that I did have.
You know, I came in here for the procedure, and you know, when it was done, I went home, and you know, my wife noticed an immediate difference in my stress level and my behavior, and just me, like a John Zarian again.
So in this last month, you haven't had any of those nightmares?
No, none of the ones I described before. Never had them again.
I felt the anxiety just kind of peel away, and then I just had this profound quiet in my head. All of that repeating dialogue that was essentially feeling like I was going crazy and in an unsustainable way. It just went away, and I just had a clarity of thought that I hadn't had in almost a decade.
I was happier.
Immediately.
Yeah, pretty much immediately. I mean, that day, I remember I got home, and my 2-year-old daughter, she just did something goofy. I think she like climbed up her little slide and went down upside down and backwards. And she crashed into a little beanbag at the bottom, and I remember laughing, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed at something like that. Oh, I feel like there's like a control. It's like a stair step. So if I get to a 3, I don't go to a 10. I can get to a 4 if I want to. I can walk away, which I didn't do. I didn't feel like I had that kind of control. Initially, I was still like kind of rebuilding relationships, and you know, now 2 months later, there's questions on there that I don't feel distant anymore, because I've rebuilt relationships with not just my wife, but with my kids, with coworkers, with my extended family. So obviously, probably not the easiest one to talk about, but I had a significant drop in my libido, which as a ranger and 35-year-old man, like, it didn't make any sense to me, and it would actually frustrate me, and to the point where I would avoid intimacy with my wife. And after the shot, it's almost like, of all of the most noticeable changes, that's like the most noticeable, because it's not a problem anymore, if I could put it plainly. and I would say I'm the most happy about that I've feel like I'm myself again. Almost didn't care, if I lived or died. It just didn't matter. I'm not trying to sound morbid, but and it's not that comfortable for me to talk about, but I would say that was pretty extreme looking back in terms of a way of thinking.
How were things before the block?
Hard. Very hard.
Is there orange?
It was, you never really knew when there was going to be like an explosive anger fight. And I never knew how far it would go. Breaking things, sorry. Some physical aspects of it. It was very scary to live in. It was very inconsistent. There was no rhyme or reason to anything that was going on. It could be a fight over a cup of coffee, but then it would turn into the worst fight we had ever had. I didn't think prior to this that our marriage was going to work out.
Almost 2.5 months since Luke had the stellate ganglion block. And what changes have you noticed, Stacy?
The last 3 months have been probably the best 3 months of our marriage now. Luke wakes up happy. He's able to joke around now. There is so much less anger in our home. There's no more like rage fights that are happening. I mean, of course, we fight over like the typical marriage things, but they don't escalate like they used to. They don't go from 0 to 100. They go to like 0 to 1, and we kind of call it quits. Everyone, like the greatest part is, oh, it's gonna make me cry. I got to fall back in love with my husband for a second time. Like not, I feel so blessed because it got to happen not only once, but twice. Like this is the man I married now, and I'm just so grateful for it. It's truly, he's back.
So really, you're saying there hasn't been a big change at all?
no, not a change at all.
I have to go back to the drawing board on this one.
I'm excited. There's kind of like what we talked about, a treatment option where I'm not trying to get rid of those. I'm not trying to repress those memories. I'm not trying to change who I am. But if I can get those memories and those images to fit properly back on the shelf where they need to be, instead of randomly coming out when they decide that they need to come out, and start messing with my daily functional life, then that's good. So just I'm glad that it's not I'm not having to take a pill every day. I'm not having to go talk to somebody 3 times a week to seek help, so I can still be a functioning individual and serve our country.
Not to say that my problems have gone away, because I still have them. Not to say that my emotions have gone away, because I still have them. I have anger, I have sadness, I have all of those things. But I can take a breath and realize and work with my emotion instead of let the emotion take over me.
Again, I really hope that we can get other soldiers this treatment, because now I can think of at least 30 people that could benefit from this, and it's unfortunate that people are committing suicide every day, and people are living lives where they're not being their full potential because this isn't available to them.
It's scary to want to be 33 and check out.
But you don't feel that way now.
No, not even. I can't even. The person that did think that way is like a stranger to me. 2 shots in the neck saved it all. Saved my life.